I began my 475 placement experience at Dillingham Intermediate School in Mrs. Wilson's 5th grade ELAR classroom, where I would be teaching a 100% gifted and talented class. Now, the only problem was I knew absolutely nothing about gifted and talented students and had no idea how to appropriately cater to their success. So, I just started teaching. In essence, I initially ran this classroom similar to a regular education class, and that I did not effectively cater to their gifted and talented needs. It was not until my first evaluation that I experienced some feedback. That would lead me to realize that I was really doing my students an injustice by my inability to operate the classroom in a way that would help them as learners, not me as a teacher. So I was then deemed with the hard question. How could I effectively teach a gifted and talented classroom? From that moment on, I was determined to push my students to their highest capabilities. In the beginning, I would only ask surface level questions such as, did your opinion change? Or discuss what it would be like. I then realized that I would have to implement a lot of high order thinking questions and scenarios into my instruction by asking students questions like, why do authors want us to make inferences? Or how does identifying character traits help us read a novel? To my benefit, I was able to conduct a novel study over the book The Hatchet, where I would have students identify and recall inferences and make predictions about the text. It was here that I would have the best opportunity to see how far I could actually push my gifted and talented students. I immediately realized that although my students were gifted and talented, they struggled to make inferences and connections about the text. This is mostly due to the fact that they are 10 and 11 and still very much concrete learners. Because of this, it was a challenge for me to get my students to think abstractly about concepts. But according to Teeks, they had to be able to do it. I was able to do this by modeling abstract concepts in a concrete way. I would usually do this by showing a YouTube video about the subject, such as an inference, and then ask students to come up with their own examples or give my own examples of what that particular strategy is. I began to heavily implement reading comprehension techniques and strategies into the classrooms to help students critically think as they are reading text. I use strategies like in-class discussions. Tell me, what point of view is this in?
Third person limited.
Window notes, mind's eye, book responses, sticky notes, and an absolute ton of reading to encourage my gifted and talented students to critically think about the text. My students were also very auditory, so I really made sure to put an emphasis on discussions about the text and how setting, hooks, inferences, foreshadowing, and point of view were crucial for readers to understand in novels by predetermining what I wanted my students to learn from said discussion. Another problem that I spotted in my students was that their vocabularies were pretty low. I decided to implement more academic words or CALP within my instruction, such as terms and phrases like evaluate the significance, develop a coherent question, and explain your rationale. I would ask students to justify their reasoning, defend their answers, and many high order thinking questions to push my students to their limit. I realized as a teacher that I enjoy GT classrooms because I got to be creative with students and help them push past the application level and encourage them to high order think as I attempted to work them up Bloom's revised taxonomy. I realized that when it comes to instructing GT groups that these kids are very inquisitive, mature, intelligent, and ask a ton of questions. I had to make sure I was well prepared and knew my content before teaching it to students because it really does make the world of difference. I was really made aware of this one class period when a student asked me what an onomatopoeia was, and my mind went blank. I realized that I really had to bring my A game to each class period. Instructing a gifted and talented classroom takes a lot of energy to plan and requires an emphasis on analysis, evaluation, and synthesis levels. In the end, the most important thing that I learned about my GT learners was that these kids are just kids. The only difference is that they require differentiated instruction to ensure the best success for them as learners.